Welcome to the latest edition of the Evergreen Basics new staff series. Today we're going to be talking about resource sharing. And we're really going to be focusing on sort of a macro view of resource sharing, what the life cycle of resource sharing looks like, as well as some of the major policies that back it up. Now, if you are a resource sharing primary contact, and this is a major part of your job, then you may have some questions that get into a little bit more detail than what we cover during the base presentation. You're welcome to ask those questions. We will happily answer them. If they are kind of above my head, then Will is here and will be happy to help me out with anything. If you are a circulator or new to resource sharing or something like that, then hopefully this gives you kind of that basic overview to get started with. So we're really going to talk about resource sharing in terms of how it functions. We're going to talk a little bit about the policies, and as we go through that sort of life cycle, we're going to do a little bit of troubleshooting. I'm going to point out some key areas where weird things tend to happen and talk about some different ways to manage those. The perspective, as I said, is mostly those who may work with resource sharing kind of tangentially, such as circulation staff or newer staff who are just learning the ropes. So those of you who are a little bit more established, maybe you'll learn some tips that you weren't aware of. And definitely, as I said, feel free to ask questions as we go. We won't really be looking into things like the FedEx website, but if you do have questions about that, feel free to stick around once the major portion of the webinar is done and we can answer those questions then. If you are looking for a little bit of a higher level training than this, I'm going to put a link in the chat. This is to a webinar that we did last spring that goes into a little bit more detail in some of those other areas like FedEx. That might be helpful for you. So let's go ahead and get into the process of resource sharing. Before we do that, I do want to cover a little bit of vocabulary. So these are all different terms that come up quite a bit in Evergreen and in NC Cardinal. Within the context of today's webinar, I just wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about what I mean when I use these words, because they can mean different things in different contexts. So in this context, request, this is the original hold that the patron placed. So when a patron places a hold, what they're really doing is placing a hold request, and then eventually that request is fulfilled. The pickup library, this is the library where the patron will actually check the item out. So it's important to note that the pickup library of all of the libraries involved in resource sharing, and there are about 4 different libraries that can be involved in this process. The one that has the greatest impact on hold policies and whether or not a hold's actually going to be fulfilled is usually the pickup library. The patron's home library may not match this pickup library. So you may have a patron whose home library is set at maybe one branch within a system, and they want to pick up an item in a different branch. You may even occasionally have a patron who, maybe they're on vacation and they're away from their home library, but they want to get a hold while they're there. They may have an item set to be picked up at the library nearest where they're on vacation. So the pickup library is not necessarily set by wherever the patron normally uses the library or what their home library is set as in their account. So just something to be aware of. The pull list is a list of items with active hold requests that a library can fulfill. One of the things that's really important to note about this is that each pull list is unique in that any item that is listed on your pull list is not listed on any other library's pull list. So an item will only be on one pull list at a time. Target is essentially the process Evergreen uses to determine the item that will fulfill a hold request most efficiently. Or in some cases, I may use that as a way to talk about the copy itself that's going to be used to fulfill that hold request. In the kind of underlying architecture of Evergreen, those items that are going to be used to fulfill a hold are referred to as target copies. So I may say that occasionally. And then fulfillment in this situation, what I mean is the entire process of getting a requested item checked out to a patron. So from the point of making the hold request to the point of checkout is the process of fulfillment. When we talk about that process, so when we talk about resource sharing as a whole, the first phase of that is the initial request. This is when a patron places a hold on a title. Um, so if a patron would like to borrow a book that their library does not own, they can go ahead and place a hold. They can place a hold on that no matter where that book is, as long as somebody in NC Cardinal has it. When Evergreen sees that a local copy is not available to fulfill that hold request, it's immediately going to begin searching the entire catalog for a copy that will. Evergreen is set up in a way that prioritizes proximity, and this allows us to kind of speed up fulfillment time and to save on shipping costs. So the copies owned by a closer library will usually be targeted first. As soon as an available copy is located, it's targeted, which means Evergreen sees it and it basically puts it on a pull list. So that brings us to phase two, which is the capture. When that copy is targeted, the owning library will see it pop up on their pull list. This is that list that's generated that has just a list of everything that needs to be pulled to fulfill a hold. And as I said, it's unique to your library. This is generated in real time. So as Evergreen targets items to fulfill holds, that pull list gets updated to reflect those targets. Libraries are required to check it at least once a day because of that, the fact that it is that sort of like living list. Larger libraries that typically have a longer list are actually encouraged to check it more often. You may find that you have basically a full day's worth again in the afternoon, but typically at the very least check it in the morning. Copies that do linger on a library's pull list will retarget after 24 hours, so they'll move on to a different library's pull list. So you don't necessarily have to worry that you are significantly delaying the process if you are unable to get to your pull list for a few days. But what we would definitely recommend is that if you have a single person who does resource sharing, identify a backup for them so that if that person is not at work for a few days, there's somebody else who can step in and fulfill that role. Let's take a quick look at the pull list itself. I'm just going to pull one up here. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. We are going to look at it in an incognito window because I want to show you what happens when you are in a pull list for the first time, just in case you're new. So if you're on a new computer or if you have never pulled up the pull list before, you may actually experience a slight loading error. So I did want to show that. So we're going to go into the pull list, which we can get to from the circulation menu here. And when we do that, if this is our first time, this little loading bar will basically go on indefinitely. So the way that you can avoid that, you go ahead and close the loading bar, and then you can reset your pull list to Cardinal, close the loading bar again, and then reset it to where you want it, to where you actually are, and that's going to load. And once you've done that once, you shouldn't have to do it again. It's a bug that came up a few years ago. Oh, and this is being a little finicky again. I'm going to give it a moment. Oh, well, it loaded, but there's nothing there, which is fine. Oh, there we go. So basically, it's just a bug that showed up a few years ago. For the most part, I think it's been worked out, but you still see it every once in a while. Once you have sort of reset it to your branch at least once, you should never have to deal with it again. But if there's anyone who has not pulled this list up before, I wanted to show you what to do in that situation just in case. If you are on, let's see. So once you have pulled your pull list, a couple of things to note here, and this isn't really an issue at this particular library as we only have these 5 items. Let me go to some place that's got a little bit more. One of the things that you can do when you have a particularly long list is you can do some different things to change the view of the list. So one thing you can do is you can change how many items appear in a single page. So you can increase that up to 25 or 50 or even 100. Of course, the more you have here, the longer it'll take to load. Another thing that you can do, which can be useful if you have a very big list, is you can sort by pickup library. And so what you can actually do is have 3 separate lists that you print. And you can start by printing one that is holds, like local holds. These are just holds that your patrons have requested from your library. And in this case, there's nothing, but in other cases, you may have just, a handful of these. You can have somebody go out and pull those holds and get them set for your patrons, kind of separately from the larger resource sharing list. Then, of course, you can also do that for your system. So just those inter-system loans rather than the full resource sharing loans. You can do that by setting to your system level. And so again, this would be something that would allow you to kind of split up the work so that different staff can kind of focus on different areas. And then once you've done that, you can set it to all of Cardinal, and that allows you to get all your resource sharing holds set at once. Some other things you can do here is you can also order the list by shelving location. So, if you are going to have most of your things coming up in adult fiction, maybe you want to pull that list first thing in the morning, and everything else maybe you'll do later in the day. So you can definitely do that as well. And then just like any other grid in Evergreen, you do have the ability to kind of change the view of the grid. You can add and remove columns and things like that. And then, of course, when you're ready, you can print the grid. There are a couple of different ways to print. You can print the full grid. That's going to give you everything. You can also download it. And then, if you want to kind of sort things out by shelving location within an Excel file, you can do that there from the downloaded version of it. Another thing you can do is if you just want to, let's increase these numbers again. Let's say you just wanted to pull items in adult fiction with call numbers A through M or something like that. You could order by call number, and then you can select the specific ones that you want. And then you can print just those. So this allows you to kind of, once again, split up the pulling process. If you do have staff, if you have the staff available to have multiple people pulling at once. So this allows you to do that, to just print selected rows. So a lot of different things you can do with the pull list. All right, so once you have gone and pulled all the items off the shelf, then you would take it back to a computer, and this is where you would do the actual capture. The capture is really just a check-in process. When you do that, it's going to put the items into a state of in transit. One of the things I recommend with this is to put on the check-in modifier of to automatically print hold and transit slips. That way, each time you scan, you don't have to manually then print the slip. It's going to happen automatically. And then, of course, also if you have a situation where for example, something has retargeted from the time you printed the pull list to the time it was pulled, it's no longer going to go in transit. You're going to see that immediately when you scan it because it's not going to print a slip. So that's going to alert you that something's not quite right here. And I'll show you how to put on that hold modifier real quick. So if you go under the circulation menu and you come here to capture holds, you can come over here to this check-in modifiers menu at the bottom, and you can choose to auto print hold and transit slips. Now, I always have that on my computer, and you can see that when you first come in here because it's up here at the top in pink. It is sticky, which means that once you've set it once, it will remain set until you remove it. And that just allows those slips to print. Each time you scan, it's automatically going to print. At that point, everything is ready to be shipped. So you're just going to set it aside, and whatever it is that your library does in terms of your shipping frequency will then determine the next step. Some libraries will wait until there are enough items that are ready to be shipped to the pickup library so they can send them all back together. Or they may just wait a designated number of days. So they may wait till you have 5 items. You may wait 5 days. And that brings us to phase 3, which is the actual shipment. Shipment itself and packing for shipment is one of the key parts to resource sharing. It's one of the things that causes, I'd say, the most amount of kind of frustration with the process. So it's really important to make sure that you're packing your items well. Obviously, I'm not really able to do like a virtual packing demonstration through this webinar. That wouldn't, I'm not sure that I'd be able to do that well. Um, but I can give you just sort of a few of the major pointers with this. Key things to remember when pack. Oh, and actually, you know what? Let me share this. We do have a packing tutorial in our knowledge book that kind of goes through step by step of how to pack a box for resource sharing. It's got a lot of images. It was put together by one of the libraries that does quite a lot of resource sharing and has been doing it very well for a very long time. So it's definitely a resource I recommend if you have not looked at it before. A few key things that I will mention though. First, don't use boxes that are on the verge of falling apart. Obviously, we all like to recycle and reuse. Getting boxes can be difficult. So you want to be able to get the most use out of the ones you have, but FedEx is not known for its gentle handling. So if a box looks like it basically needs a layer of tape just to keep it from falling apart, that box is not a good idea for shipping. One thing that you can do with those older boxes to get the most use out of them, though, is to, once they're no longer viable for shipping, cut them up into pieces of cardboard that can then be used to reinforce other boxes. And they're also really useful to put on top of the materials before closing the box, so that when somebody goes in with a box cutter, they're not accidentally, cutting into the covers of books. So, just make sure that your boxes are not on the verge of falling apart. When you pack a box, fill it with packing material so that the books aren't being tossed around during shipment. This packing material can be packing paper, bubble wrap, smaller boxes that are kind of past their prime, mailers that are no longer useful. Basically, anything that you have on hand that can fill those gaps without adding a lot of weight is going to be useful for this. The one thing to avoid though is newspapers, because the ink may rub off on the books. If you do have a lot of newspaper and you don't have a lot of other packing materials, you can use it, but just make sure that it is covered with something else. So if you have a little packing paper and a lot of newspaper, you can maybe ball up the newspaper and then wrap it in the packing paper. Just make sure that you're not going to get that ink rubbing off on your materials. This one should go without saying, but somehow we have to say it kind of often. If the box is dirty or smelly, don't use it. So we have had libraries report receiving boxes that smell like peanut butter, cleaning agents, dog food, and even mold. If the box smells, the books inside it will likely pick up some of that smell. So just if it smells, don't use it. If it's stained, especially if that stain has any kind of residue, don't use that either, because that residue can rub off on the materials. And then of course, tape well, reinforce the corners, make sure the box is unlikely to open in transit. We have had boxes open in transit before. FedEx has not always managed to get the right materials back in the right boxes. The other side of that though is don't tape it to within an inch of its life. If you would be annoyed to have to open a box because it's too taped, then that's probably too much tape. So just use some judgment with that. Make sure the box is in good shape to ship, but that once it arrives there, you can open it, basically. So once the shipment is packed, then you print your shipping label from FedEx, and then FedEx takes it from there. Eventually, it's going to arrive at the library where it's going to be checked out, and staff there will go ahead and unpack it. They'll scan the items. Those items will either be moved out to branch libraries within that system, because it's going to go to the hub, or it's going to go directly to their hold shelf. When an item's scanned upon arrival, then a hold slip print. So when you put it in transit, a transit slip printed. When it arrives at the pickup library, then a hold slip is going to print. Staff place that slip inside the item. Don't tape it or paper clip it or anything like that. Just place it inside the item and then go ahead and put it on the hold shelf. Evergreen will automatically notify the patron that that's available via email or text. There's not an automatic system for phone calls though. So if that is what your patron prefers, those phone calls would have to be made by staff directly. And then the item's going to sit on the shelf until it either gets picked up and checked out or 7 days pass. All of our items do have a shelf expiration time of 7 days. And so that brings us to phase 4.5, which is what to do with those items that never get picked up. And so this is clearing the hold shelf. If that item does not get picked up, then after 7 days, the item's going to show up on the clearable holds list. When that happens, don't clear the hold. Instead, pull the item physically from the shelf and check it in. This process will put the item into a state of in transit. If you clear it, then it will, officially speaking, be cleared from the hold shelf, but it will not be in transit. This doesn't happen too much anymore, but we did have some things for a while where a lot of items were sort of in these weird states because they were never actually checked in. They were just sent back directly from that clearing function. And then, of course, it will be shipped back following the same process that the owning library used to ship it to you. I will show you that clearable holds thing real quick in case you're not familiar with it. So if you go into the circulation menu and you come here to the hold shelf, again, this one may take a moment to load depending on how many items are on it. If you click on this button that says show clearable holds, it'll basically reduce the list down to only those that have expired. And in this case, because I'm in our next server, all of them have expired. From here, do not click the clear these holds buttons. Just ignore that. Instead, take the item, move into the check-in screen, and check the item in. This will automatically either move it onto the hold shelf for another hold, is what happened just there, or put it in transit back to its owning library or to the next library where there is a hold. And so whatever happens there, you're going to print that slip and you're going to move forward with it just as you ordinarily would. Once you've done that, this hold shelf list will clear automatically. So you don't need to come back in and choose the clear these holds thing after having checked them in. They will clear automatically. This is the one that was routed back to the hold shelf, and then this one I didn't do anything with. So the third one is the one that has cleared. So that's the process of clearing holds. Which brings us to the final phase of resource sharing, which is returning the item. And this is just exactly the same as that initial shipment. You're going to wait until you either have enough items or a certain number of days have passed, depending on what your library's policies are. You're going to pack it up in a box to go to its home library. It's going to get a shipping label and it's going to get picked up and shipped back home or to the next library where it's going to fulfill a hold. So that brings us to the end of the kind of life cycle of resource sharing. Are there any questions about any of that before we get into policies? Right, well, let's go ahead and talk about some of the policies. If you do have questions, a lot of the stuff that we just talked about will be kind of come back into play as we go through the policies. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them in chat as we go along because they will almost certainly come back around. And even if they don't, I'm happy to answer them as we go. So when we talk about policies with resource sharing, we kind of have a basic set of them. And then within a lot of these policies, there are kind of additional policies. So this is sort of the list of the basic policies that we have. And then from here, we'll kind of look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So we're not going to actually go in this order, but sort of the order of impact, I guess. The main basic policy is that holds placed in one library may be fulfilled by materials from any library. That is what resource sharing is. That's what makes it work. After that, one of the things to note is that circulations will always follow the policy set at the pickup library, which means that if your library has a circulation policy of 21 days for all books, any book that comes in from any other library will circulate for 21 days. They'll follow your policies. All libraries must share books, audiobooks, videos, and music. There are other things that may be shared in addition to those, but all libraries must share those 4 item types. Materials targeted for holds appear on a library's hold pull list, and this list should be checked at least once a day. We did look at that, so I'm not sure that we're going to come back to that unless we have a little extra time. But the big thing to know with that is that you do need to stay on top of that pull list. So as I said, if you have sort of a one-person shop in resource sharing, designate somebody else somewhere on staff to be your backup in case you are out sick or take a vacation or anything like that, so that that pull list can continue to be checked daily. Shipping at this time goes through FedEx. We are continuously looking at other options for that. We explore things as we find them. We have yet to find something that we feel is a good replacement for FedEx, regardless of how good FedEx may or may not be. We have not yet found something that is going to be affordable and offer the same consistency and level of service. When we do, because we are continually looking for that, we will certainly share that information. The basic process by which resource sharing is set up is the concept of hub and spoke, almost like airports. There's a hub library within each system, and then branches within that system receive their resource sharing materials from that hub. So that means that you don't have, one branch within one system shipping to another branch within another system. The branch would go to the hub, and then the hub would ship to the hub, and then that second hub would move out to the branches via a local courier. Materials that are too damaged to ship safely should not be shipped. And if there's any issue whatsoever, but particularly things related to lost or damaged items, communicate with the owning library. So we're going to go through most of these policies now. We're going to start with all libraries must share books, audiobooks, videos, and music, because as straightforward as this sounds, there are some idiosyncrasies to it. Basically, when we talk about those four types, we're talking about items with those four circulation modifiers. So those aren't always necessarily the same as the item type. For example, when you are cataloging a book, and it is a large print book, it has certain things that go into the catalog, that go into the catalog record that designate it as large print, and then it gets that large print icon. That item still counts as a book because it has a circulation modifier of book, despite the fact that its icon is not the same as a regular book icon. Another thing that comes up quite a lot is that a lot of libraries may have playaways that they have classified in terms of the circulation modifier as an audiobook. So even though it is designated as a different format, it circulates like an audiobook, and as a result becomes available for resource sharing. It's a little confusing. Circulation modifiers don't always match the item type. Most of the time it does, but there are definitely situations where it doesn't. So let's actually take a look really quick at this record for the Lightning Thief. This is an example of one of those playaways that some libraries may classify differently. So if we look at, the record itself, this is classified as a playaway, which is sort of a subcategory of preloaded audio. If we look at the record, we're going to find cataloging that designates this item as that. But if we look down here at the item table, we see that 3 libraries that own it have it designated as a playaway in their circulation modifier, but one of them has it designated as an audiobook, which means at Haywood, Maine, this item circulates as an audiobook, regardless of what its format icon is. It's an audiobook, which is fine. A lot of libraries do want their playaways to circulate very similarly to their audiobooks. But when it comes to resource sharing, these 3 libraries may not send their playaways out because that is an optional item type for resource sharing. Haywood, Maine theoretically will, because it's classified as an audiobook in terms of circulation modifier. So that's just something to be aware of, that sometimes the circulation modifier may not entirely reflect the item format. And the circulation modifier is what determines whether something is shared by policy or not. Now, of course, some libraries can choose to share anything else. There are a lot more circulation modifiers than just these, but these are sort of the four outside of the core four that get shared the most. Um, it's also important to note that within resource sharing, this can have an effect on the patron's experience. So as a circulator, you may run into kind of um, the final outcome of this sort of idiosyncrasy. So, for example, if a patron comes in looking for playaways, specifically for their child, and they are having trouble finding them at your library. Maybe your library doesn't own playaways, or your library does own playaways, but they don't have a lot of children's books on them. And so you want to help that patron place holds on them. When you search, one of the things that you may find is because Playaway is not a required resource sharing circ modifier, you may or may not be able to fulfill that hold request. And it's not always apparent right off the bat. So for example, let's say that you were searching for this patron and you found something that they were interested in. And, you know, it's the one and only Bob, and it's a playaway, and it is owned by a single library by Forsyth Central. They have it under playaway as the circ modifier. It is not currently under age hold protection because it was activated almost a full year ago. So it's past that point, and it's available. So this should be a potential target for this particular patron's request. But you don't necessarily know that because playaway as a circ modifier does not automatically get sent out via resource sharing. So what do you think is likely to happen if you put a hold on a situation like this where only one library owns it? That item is available and it's not age hold protected. Maybe that your library allows circulation or resource sharing of playaways, but this you're not sure what the other library's policies are. Do you think that this item is likely to be fulfilled, this hold request? So basically, this item's fulfillment potential is based entirely on the owning library's policies, not the pickup library's policies. So just because the pickup library lends these via resource sharing has no effect on whether or not that playaway is going to be picked up. The only way that you can really tell easily is to actually attempt to place a hold on this. So you can do that, and then you can tell the patron right away whether or not it seems likely. So I placed this hold and I see that it succeeded, which means that most likely this is going to be fulfilled because if the library had a policy in place that did not allow resource sharing of playaways, then the hold would fail immediately. So just something to be aware of that when you are outside of those four core circulation modifiers, resource sharing hold requests may or may not be successful. When we're talking about policies, the other one that I really wanted to highlight is the concept that circulation policies are set at the pickup library. And I mentioned this at the very beginning, but basically what that means is that if your library has a circulation policy that covers this particular material, then that policy is what will be followed when the item's checked out at your library, regardless of what the own-in library's policy is. This can become tricky though, because patrons can bring in materials through resource sharing that your library does not own. So for example, in this scenario, a patron has borrowed Taylor Swift's new album via resource sharing. Your library does not own or circulate music. So you don't have anything in your collection that has that circ modifier of music. The patron checks out the item. It checks out just fine. Nothing's odd about that. But then when the patron goes to return it, they're 3 days late and they're charged a fee. This is odd because your library doesn't charge fees. And as a result, you're not really sure what to do with this. Is this something to do with resource sharing? Is this something to do with the owning libraries policy? What actually has happened here is that because your library doesn't circulate music, you don't have a policy for music. So when the patron checked out that music CD, it's not that it followed the owning library circulation policy. Instead, it followed a policy set at the cardinal level. Basically, Cardinal has a set of generic policies that will cover anything. So patrons never going to be in a situation where they come up to the desk to check something out and they're not able to because there's no circulation policy for it. So there's always going to be at least that generic one. Unfortunately, these generic policies are fairly limited. They charge fees and they generally don't have much in the way of renewals. So they can result in a patron being late because they didn't realize that this item doesn't renew, whereas everything else they've ever checked out has always renewed. And on top of that, they didn't realize that when they turned it in 3 days late, they'd be charged 75 cents because the policy that they checked it out on has a 25-cent per day overdue fee. So one of the ways that you can deal with this is set up circ policies even for materials you don't own. If your library does not circulate materials with circ modifiers that come in via resource sharing, like music or playaways, then ask us to set up a circ policy for you. You don't have to do this. You're welcome to just forgive those fines as they come in if this is not something that happens very often. You are under no obligation to make the patron pay those fines. But if you just want to avoid the sort of confusion that comes with this, if you want to make sure that you have control over how these materials circulate, then setting up circ policies, even when you don't circulate those materials as a rule, is a good idea. So feel free to reach out to us and we can check whether or not you have those circ policies. And if you don't, if you'd like to set them up. So that's just something to be aware of. The next thing that I wanted to get into is damaged materials. So when you are the shipper, when you're basically the library that is sending something out via resource sharing, avoid sending materials that are significantly damaged. You may keep things on your shelf longer than another library. That's okay. That's your choice. But if you are in a situation where you're sending something out to be checked out at a different library, make sure that you're assessing it first to ensure that it is something that that other library would be okay to get and that that patron would be comfortable taking home with them. Also, you want to avoid anything that could damage other materials simply by being near them. So the big one here, obviously, if there are bugs in the book, don't send it. If there are bugs in the book, you might want to check around where it was shelved also. You don't want to spread those bugs beyond your library. If there is mold on the book, please don't send it because the other things in the box that you're sending it with may pick up that mold. Other books that it's shelved with at the receiving library may pick up that mold. Just in general, we don't want to spread mold around. So if you do find mold on a book, don't send it. Stains and water damage. This is a little bit of a judgment call. If the stain is significant enough that it interferes with the patron's ability to interact with the item, if water damage is, throughout the book and you have, the book that doesn't close all the way because the pages are so bloated and everything, or if there is still any hint of moisture, then you don't want to send that. Or if the stain itself is not totally dry and could potentially stain other things that it's near, then you don't want to send that. Items that have been excessively written in. This is once again a little bit of a judgment call. If somebody has underlined a few things within the text, may not be a big deal. If a kid has gone in and colored in all the black and white pictures with crayons, probably not something to send. You may be comfortable keeping it in your collection. You may not have the budget to be able to replace it. That's okay, but it's probably not something worth sending. In that case, you would want to retarget it from your hold pull list, and then the patron will have that hold request fulfilled by a different library. If an item has a bad smell, Please don't send that because that smell is going to end up on everything else in the box. And again, could end up near on the items that are near it on the hold shelf at the receiving library. Typically, when we talk about this, what we really mean is like cigarette smoke, those books that you can smell that on it when they're returned. Um, if your library has a quarantine policy for those materials and you find something when pulling, go ahead and put it in that quarantine. If you don't have a policy and you're comfortable keeping that on your shelf, that's okay. It's again, each library sets their own policies for weeding and collection management. That's fine. But because those smells can rub off on the things that an item is shipped with, we definitely don't want them to be shipped together. The next two are kind of connected. A broken binding, so a book with a broken binding, not only is in and of itself that damaged, but also that broken binding can lead to further damage. And so the broken binding itself may or may not be a big deal to a patron trying to read the book, but when pages start falling out as a result of that broken binding, you don't want that patron to be charged for it. So in these cases, we just ask that you not send things partially for the sake of, the book itself. It may not be able to hold up to the shipment, and also partially for the patron who, is not going to want to be charged for something that they didn't cause in the first place, but they may have exacerbated simply by reading. So again, these are the types of things that they may hold up to a single patron checking the item out. They may not hold up through shipping. And then the final one, if a disc, so whether it's a DVD or music CD or anything like that, if it is broken or too heavily scratched to play, don't send it. This is going to interfere with the patron's ability to actually interact with that material. So please don't send that. In general, with this, it's a judgment call of would I, as a patron, be comfortable checking out this item? Or would I, as a library staff member, be comfortable putting this item next to other other items from my own collection? And if the answer to that is no, then don't send it through resource sharing. You can make a call on how you want to deal with it in-house, but don't ship it and potentially spread some of those issues. Now, if you are on the other end of that and you do receive damaged materials, you also have a judgment call to make. Basically, you need to determine, is this something that I'm comfortable checking out to a patron? And if so, that's fine. You just need to note the damage. If not, that's also okay. You need to go through a few steps so you can ensure that the patron still gets their hold fulfilled simply by a different item. Before you make any call at all, do not mark the item, do not receive the item, don't scan it on your end, because once it's scanned on your end, it does become a little bit trickier to send it back. So if you see damage when you're unpacking the box, don't go ahead and scan that item right away. Wait until you have determined what you want to do with it. So if the item can circulate, we do ask that you fill out a resource sharing damage slip, and I'm going to put a link to that in chat. So this is just a template that we have. You can print them out and fill them out. Put them inside the book along with the hold slip. Again, no tape or paper clips or anything like that, just inside the book. And then also I would alert your circulation staff that these to look for these so that if they see them, they can alert the patron to the fact that it's there. And then add an item alert noting the damage. And this is for the patron's sake. If you are checking out an item that has visible damage on it that you don't own, make sure that you're noting that damage so that when it returns to the owning library, they don't charge your patron for that damage. That damage existed before the item was checked out. Sometimes this may be the result of damage that happened during shipment. And so, the patron certainly should not be penalized for that. So make sure that you're adding that damage slip and that item note on the item itself. So we're going to talk about this sort of within the context of both choices. So if your library receives a book via resource sharing and it's got visible damage, in this scenario, the book's not falling apart, the binding's secure, there are no loose pages, so there's no concern that anything is actually missing from the content of the book. But there are significant pencil marks on the title page, and there is a dried water stain on the back cover. Looking at this, you could make two choices. You could decide not to check it out to the patron and basically retarget their hold, or you could choose to check it out to the patron, but make sure that you're noting the damage. If you choose not to check the item out, then you need to do a few things. First of all, remember I said don't scan those items as received once you get them if they look damaged. This is why, because when you have determined that you're not going to send it out, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with. If the item has not been marked received, the first thing that you want to do is find that hold request and retarget it. So basically, you're going to go into that item. Um, let's go ahead and take a look at that here. So if I go into this item in the catalog and I find it, I can come up here to the actions menu. This isn't going to work because there's only one, but just to see how to do it, and choose find another target. That's going to immediately retarget the hold, which means it's going to show up on another library's pull list. From there, you'll scan the item. So don't scan the item until you've retargeted. Once you've retargeted, scan that item, and that's going to reroute the transit back to the owning library. Fill out your damage slip and prep the item to be shipped. If you have determined that you are going to check the item out to the patron, that the damage is not severe enough to interfere with the patron's enjoyment of the item or to cause further damage while it's in their possession, then the first thing you want to do is go ahead and receive the item, but then add an item alert to it. So the way that you do that is in the holdings editor for that item, you'll come over here to alerts, and you want this alert to come when the item is checked in. So you're going to choose from this drop down here for alert type, normal check-in. Then you're going to describe the damage. You'll want to say something about how damage found when item received via resource sharing. Pencil marks on title page and water stain on back cover. You'll put in your date and your initials. Now up here, there is this little option here to make it temporary. Do not check that option because this item is going to be checked in twice. It's going to be checked in when your patron returns it to you, and it's going to be checked in at the owning library when it returns home. If you choose temporary, then that item will show up when it's returned to you and then disappear. So we're not going to choose temporary. We're just going to choose add new, and then we're going to click apply changes. Once you've done that, go ahead and fill out a damage slip, the same as you would for something that you're about to send back to the library. You're going to fill out that same damage slip, and you're going to place it inside the item with the hold slip. Make sure your circulators are aware of this damage slip and they're prepared to alert the patron upon checkout. You can do something like have your damage slips all print out on like red paper or something like that if you have that ability, so that they're really visible to your circulators. That's your choice. But just make sure that that damage slip is in there. If the item is returned without the damage slip, you may want to print it again so that it returns to its home library with that damage slip intact. All right, any questions about dealing with lost or with damaged materials upon receipt? Next, we're going to talk about what happens when patrons damage materials, but that's a slightly different can of worms. So. All right, so let's talk about what you do when a patron loses an item or damages an item. And the main thing that you do is you communicate with the owning library before you do anything else. So if an item is lost by a patron, the first thing that you need to do is contact the owning library. If this is a situation where a patron has come in and told you they've lost the item, then don't mark the item lost yet. Instead, contact the owning library before you mark the item lost. If this is a situation where an item has gone into a status of lost due to being long overdue, obviously you're not going to know that until the status happens, but you still want to contact the owning library as soon as possible. The owning library may say, that's okay. You know, let it go, in which case you can mark it lost and then mark it for discard. Um, or yeah, you'll need to check it in off the patron's account and then mark it for discard. Um, you can also, in some cases, the owning library may say, please mark it lost and charge them appropriately. Just like circulation policies, a lot of this is going to be set at your library in terms of fees and everything, but some of it is set based on the owning library as well. So if they have sort of a set fee for lost items or something like that, I do believe that that would take precedence. I'm not actually 100% sure, but I think that it would. Um, Regardless, if the owning library does ask you to mark it lost, it will most likely result in a fee on the patron's account. There are some options with this fee. So the patron may want to pay that fee immediately. The kind of ideal situation is that the owning library gets the money back. But if the patron wants to pay immediately, or if the book came from really far away, it just may not be an option for the patron to travel to that library to pay in person. So if they want to pay, they can go ahead and pay you. Some libraries do accept credit card payments through their OPAC. So if this is the case for the library that owned the item, then you definitely want to give that option to the patron. If they are unable to pay via credit card, then again, that cash payment can come to you. Some libraries may accept a replacement copy rather than a payment. In this case, patrons do need to supply that themselves. You can't do a situation where the patron gives you money and then you purchase the replacement. The replacement does need to come from the patron. Some libraries will accept replacement copies, but will want to choose the replacement copy that they'll accept. So this process can take a little while to kind of come through. The major thing to keep in mind is that we want patrons to be able to use the library. So if they have incurred a fee due to losing a material, give them the ability to pay that fee, whether it is via the credit card payment on the owning library's OPAC or giving you cash directly. Let the patron pay the fee. If they give you the cash, though, that is your payment. Money can't cross county lines, so there is no way for you to move that payment on to the owning library. We have kind of looked into this to see what the sort of long-term outcomes of this are, and it all kind of ends up evening out. While there may be a situation where you lose out on an item and another library takes the payment for that item, the opposite's going to happen too, where you end up taking payment for an item that another library owned, and it does tend to work out over time that it's even. On top of that, you'd be surprised, resource sharing materials are very rarely lost. Typically speaking, the patrons who are engaging in resource sharing are pretty responsible library users. They're the ones who are in and out a lot, and as a result, they're generally speaking not the ones who are losing a lot of materials or just sort of never coming back again. So you just don't know what happened. So it is actually pretty rare that items get lost. One thing to note is that if you do have a patron who disputes a lost item fee, you do need to put them in contact with the owning library. The owning library needs to arbitrate that with them rather than you. Damaged items, sort of similar. One thing to be aware of is that if you do not charge fees for damage as a rule, but the owning library does, it's the owning library's policy that will take precedence. So regardless of your policies on damage fees, the owning library's fees will be applied. So this is one of the few exceptions to checkout library policies always win. In this particular case, it is the owning library's policies that win. So just be aware of that. Generally speaking, do not start the process of marking something damaged until you have contacted the owning library. Allow them to determine further steps. Often they may want you to send the item back so they can assess the damage themselves. So in that case, you'd let the patron know, we're going to take a look at this. There may be a damage fee at a later date, but we're not sure at this time what that fee is going to be. Um, if you do end up assessing the damage, if the owning library says go ahead and mark the item damaged, then when you do, please include an explanation of the damage in the damage alert pop-up that you get when you mark the item damaged. And then if you're sending the item back, fill out the damage slip and add the item alert so that when the other library receives it, they know what's going on with it. Both lost and damaged, the main thing to do is just to communicate. There is in the knowledge books, there is a section that says which libraries want what, basically. Library preferences for lost or damaged materials. I'm going to put this in the chat. Now, you still need to contact the library. Even if they have said what they want here, contact them before taking any action. But if you read through this, you'll find that a lot of people are kind of like, you know, we're happy to accept a replacement. We're happy to just let it go. For the most part, libraries are pretty flexible on this. We all recognize the difficulty of dealing with payments outside of our own libraries. But in general, the most important thing is to contact people. And of course, there is contact information also in the knowledge book, Cardinal primary and secondary library contacts. So I'm going to put that in the chat as well. If you are not within resource sharing, if you are a circulator, generally speaking, you want to take you don't want to do this contact yourself. You want to have your resource sharing department make the contact. But if you have a situation where that's just not possible, you do have all of the contact information here, so you can discuss options as quickly as possible in order to get the situation resolved for your patron as quickly as possible. Because in the end, the point of resource sharing is to get items to patrons. We want to make the process feel comfortable for them. We want to make it feel efficient for them. And so if resource sharing results in significant difficulties when it comes to this aspect of it, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to kind of smooth that over. All right, that brings me to the end of the actual webinar, but I'm happy to take questions. I did want to point out, I did share earlier the YouTube recording about last year's resource sharing training. That one's a little bit more in depth, a little bit more focused on sort of primary resource sharing staff. Then I also wanted to share the Niche Academy module that we have on resource sharing. And this is available for those who may be new to resource sharing or for those who are maybe learning to be a backup or something like that. So it starts at a little bit of a very, entry level. Otherwise, what questions do you have? And as I said at the beginning, if your questions are a little bit more in depth than what we covered today, that's fine. I'm happy to answer what I can, and Will can answer what I can't. I'm going to stop the recording though.